Hey, welcome back. Or if you're new, my name is Delian. This is the channel where we explore what it takes to actually become the main character of our own stories, which I don't think it makes sense for all of us naturally. At least it didn't for me, which is why I delved deep into things like astrology and the Enneagram, which today's video, if you couldn't tell already, is about Merida from the movie Brave. So I'm doing a series right now where I'm going through all of the Disney princesses and doing an analysis of what I believe their Enneagram type is. But why is this helpful? Because I think being able to see how an Enneagram type moves through a transformational arc or lessons or things like that is incredibly helpful because it mirrors back to us what our own journey might be like. So, buckle up. Before actually we start, a couple of things. One, I just released a video where I break down the 4 core triads for the Enneagram that I utilize in order to be able to figure out what an Enneagram character is. So if you haven't already, go check that video out. And then second, if you find this content helpful, valuable, entertaining, or you just want to be a part of building this community here together, please like, comment, subscribe. All of those things are incredibly beneficial. And grab a notebook if you want. And otherwise, I hope that you've seen Brave sometime recently. I watched it for the first time in a while, and it was really, first of all, I cried, but I cry like for all of the Disney movies. But it was really sweet. It was really good. And it was very, very different than both Tangled and Beauty and the Beast, which are the 2 videos that we've done so far. And I 100% went into this movie fairly convinced that Merida was an Enneagram type that is different than the one that I landed on. So if you want to, put your guesses down in the comments below, and then we'll all discuss later at the end of this if I was actually right. So first things first, I watched the movie yesterday, and it had been a while since I watched it, and I really, really, really do love the movie Brave. But it's interesting because when it first came out, I thought it was going to be my favorite Disney movie. It hit so many things that I related to. Girl who loves archery, rebellious, wants to live her own life. And there was like the fact that she had red hair, which I, for a lot of my life, have had red hair. But anyway, I watched the movie and I really loved it, but I didn't connect with Merida as much as I thought I was going to. And now I know why, because she is a very, very different Enneagram type than I am. And her journey is very different than mine. And I'll go through all of that in these notes. So the movie opens up this beautiful, like airy instrument and very peaceful. There's a lot of gold and greens, and all I could think of it was like very natural and like the epitome of peace and nature. And we open up on this mother trying to find her child, playing hide and go seek. And the first words we actually hear are, "Where are you? Come out, you know, wherever you are," kind of script is what I was going to say. And we see the mother and daughter's connection. Merida's hiding this little, like, she looks like she's probably 3 to 5 years old. And she's hiding underneath the table, and the mother finds her, and there's lots of giggling. It's very sweet. It's very innocent, this whole experience. And then the father shows up and throws his bow on a table after he must have been out hunting or something. And it's the first time that we hear this throughout the whole film, how the mother goes, "No weapons on the table." And we see Merida's eyes in the background light up, and she runs over. And the first words we hear from her is, "Oh, can I shoot this?" Like she's asking, I think she even says like, "Dada, Dada, can I shoot it? Can I shoot it?" And she goes and she tries to get the bow, and it's like massive for her, but undeterred in her desire. She saw what she wanted. Her eyes lit up. She went after it. And this is when the father produces a little bow just for Merida. It's her birthday, we find out. And she is thrilled, out of her mind thrilled. And then we can see the first, like, the moment the mother has like a little bit of like, what are you doing? To the father, like, a bow, seriously, but she doesn't say anything. And the father goes and starts teaching Merida how to shoot this bow and arrow. It's very sweet. It's very cute. One of the first things that I will mention is that Merida she's practicing and she misses, like, by a long shot. And she just goes, I missed. Like, she has no shame. It's just a fact. She's not even sad. And I'm bringing this up because so far the only emotion we've seen from her is like pure delight, giggling, connection with the mother, excitement. Like, we see the desire, an intense desire for the bow. And, like, she is uninhibited is really the first thing that I notice about this child. I literally wrote like lots of giggling and that she has no shame. Just, even though she misses, she's trying her hardest to shoot this arrow, just misses. It's just a fact. She goes out into the woods to find this arrow. And this is when we first hear the mother essentially scold the father about giving their daughter a weapon. Seriously. And of course he's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's fine. And while Merida is walking through the woods, again, zero fear, just open, walking through, looking for her arrow, finds her arrow, and then she sees these magical blue will-o'-the-wisps. And she follows them through, and it's very sweet. And I think that they just lead her right back to her parents. And she comes up to her parents and she's like, I saw a will-o'-the-wisp, right? She's just this adorable little girl. And this is like the first time that we hear the mother connect with her over knowing that magic exists, and the father doesn't, like, magic, which I think is interesting because of their Enneagram types. So I'll mention this as we continue going on. I think we can be pretty certain that the mother is a 1. I would say that the father behaves like a 7, maybe a 3. We don't really get super into the father's inner world. We do get into the mother's inner world, and she definitely seems like a 1, and I'll point those out as we continue on because I think it's important for the dynamic that we see ensue throughout this story. So I thought it was interesting that the 1 was like, yes, magic exists, and the father who I think is a 7 is like, nah, which I thought was cute. So the mother and the daughter are bonding over their love of like will-o'-the-wisps and magic, and then we see this massive shadow show up, and there's this monstrous bear. And of course, I think the movie even begins with, I don't know if there's narration at this point. No, I don't think so. The bear shows up, and the mother goes into super protection mode, and we see Merida scream, but watch her eyes. She doesn't look afraid. Still, there's this massive bear. She's not, like, it's just an alarm, not so much fear. And I think that's important. Again, I don't know if these creators actually know the Enneagram, but that was really compelling to me, that even though there was this really terrifying thing happen, Merida, for this entire time, her father starts fighting the bear. The mother takes her on a horse, runs away. We see concern. We see, like, we know that this is a big thing, but we don't see much fear, even as the mother takes Merida away. And then we jump shot into the future. This is where we do hear the narrator, and it's Merida. Now, this is what's interesting. For both Tangled and Beauty and the Beast, the movie does not start with either of their stories. For Tangled, the narrator is the male love interest. For Beauty and the Beast, it's just a male narrator at the beginning talking about a story. But this is the first time where we're hearing the protagonist, Merida, narrating the film. And she starts off by, at this point, saying how her father became a legend for fighting this bear. He lost his leg. He's got a great story to tell, as we hear many, many times throughout the movie. And he essentially gets anointed a king. And several tribes come together, and they live in this small city now, in this castle. And this is when we start hearing Merida talk about her life. She talks first about how her father became a legend, about how her brother, she has 3 triplet brothers that are, she calls them wee devils, and they are in fact that. And they're really just, for the most part, comic relief, and also a contrast of how she gets treated versus how they get treated. And this is when we hear her say, she goes from explaining what's happened to her first interpretation of something, which is about her brothers, how they get away with murder and I can never get away with anything. And her voice is full of frustration. Okay, so let's pause for a second. We've gone through this point of the movie so far, and what emotions I haven't seen, in spite of opportunities for them to have been seen. So her missing the arrow shot at the beginning, possibility for shame there. Nothing, not even sadness. It was just like I missed. It's very adorable. The opportunity for intense fear a couple of times. First of all, she walks through the forest by herself to find her arrow. And it's a little dark. It feels ominous. And then the moment that the bear attacks. And even though she sounds an alarm, she screams, she does not actually look that afraid. And then we get to this part, and she is full of frustration, full of it. Okay. And then literally she goes, I'm the princess. I'm the example. She says that she's the eldest daughter too, which I thought was interesting. That it starts with that. I'm the eldest daughter. I'm the princess. I'm the example. I've got duties, responsibilities, expectations. My whole life is planned out until I become my mother. And you hear like this sort of like, oh, that'll be the worst. She's in charge of every single day of my life. And then we go through a montage of the mother training Merida, essentially princess training things. And we hear, and this is when, I really love how they did this, because the mother is clearly full of love for Merida. We see it right at the beginning. We even see it in how she's going through all of these princess trainings with Merida. But she is very, very critical. She is there's a whole montage of essentially how Merida has to be better. And then at one point, it ends with the mother saying, a princess strives for, and she goes looking for a word, perfection. And this is a very one way of existing. Like, that's the goal, right? And I just think that this is, their dynamic becomes clear with the mother being a 1 as well. So then the princess training stops. She wakes up one morning. She goes, but once in a while, there's a day I don't have to be a princess. No lessons, no expectations, a day where anything can happen, the day I can change my fate. Okay, so up until this point too, like I said at the beginning of this video, I was fully prepared for Merida to be a different number than the one I landed on. In fact, expectant. And this is when at this point, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of 7-ness showing up here. A lot of desiring to be free, feeling frustrated about having her life mapped out and planned out. But one thing I'm not seeing, and if you go and you hop over to the Tangled video, I'm not seeing a lot of positive outlook. And I'm also seeing, I'm seeing just a decent amount of frustration, that it sounds more angry than it does idealism. So I'm bringing this up because 7s are in the idealism triad, along with 4s and 1s. And 7s are idealizing the horizon, the possibilities, the future. And what I find interesting is that and because of that, the idealists are also known as the frustrated types, because if you have ideals, chances are you're also frustrated because those ideals are not happening. And I am not seeing her get frustrated about ideals, which is what I would associate with a 7. I think a 7 doesn't get angry about getting trapped. Again, go check out their Tangled video. I think that when trapped, actually their first move is to go into that positive outlook space, to create a mental world where they are not trapped by creating some kind of positive outlook. Again, if you're a 7, please let me know. Merida, again, what she is excited about is that there are no expectations. There are no lessons. She doesn't have to be anything this day. And it ends with a day where I can change my fate. And this is when I was like, ooh, okay, that seems to really start leading us into a specific type. But let's keep going. Let's just see. We do hear a song that she sings at this point as she goes through her full day of adventuring. She has her bow and arrow. She has her normal routine we see of all of the targets that she shoots at through the forest that she's lined up with her horse Angus. And we see her go to this. She goes to a waterfall, but before the waterfall, she's climbing a cliff. And again, this was just really indicative of the type that she likely is. We see her pretty far up the cliff and she slips and almost falls. Again, zero fear. She giggles. She giggles instead, which really is starting to narrow her down to 2 types in my mind. But really, at this point, it's just one type. Okay, so she giggles about the fact that she almost falls to her death. She gets to this waterfall. She drinks from this waterfall. And in the background, we hear the song going on. And the main part of the song is, I will fly, I will taste the wind and touch the sky. Like it's freedom, which we would generally associate with the main desire of a 7. However, there's one other type that I would also say that this is very, very true for, but the way it shows up and the desire for it is different. So we see her go back and she wants to connect with her mother. So she gets back, she gets a big pile of cupcakes and she goes into the dining hall with her parents and her brothers, and they're all sitting, and she instantly gets criticized by her mother about what she's choosing to eat. And it's about how it's going to make her feel, or make her stomach upset, which I think is important to note. Her criticism is coming from a deep place of love for Merida. And yeah, there's a moment where Merida is looking at her mother and tries to connect with her about the adventure she went on. She talks about the waterfalls that she went to, and the father instantly engages with her about it. But the mother pretty much ignores her. She doesn't even hear her. She's like, "Oh yeah, what did you say?" And we see Merida get a little despondent about that. Okay, so then let's see. We find out that the mother gets these acceptance letters from all of the other tribes that their sons are gonna come and compete for Merida's hand. And they tell Merida this, and she gets very angry. And what she says is like, I suppose a princess just does what she's told. And before she leaves, she goes, I won't go through with it. You can't make me. All right. She storms off. Then we see her in her bedroom as her mother comes in, and she's got a sword out and she's hacking at her bedpost on her bed. Like, just, again, a lot of anger. So let's pause here. No, I'm going to say two more things. She says she has a fight with her mother, and she keeps saying, and she says this many times throughout the movie, that it's not fair. It's not fair. And then she tells her mother, and this is the first time we hear her say what she wants. And she goes, I want my freedom. And again, we could associate this with 7, but I'm not seeing her behave in a 7 way. Let's pull out the different triads. All right. So we're seeing anger as her primary emotion, which would likely bump us into the 8s, 9s, and 1s. With a caveat, and I was thinking this through the film of, okay, so 4s and 6s actually can have quite a bit of anger, along with 2s, especially when 2s are in stress. And I was like, okay, let's think about that for a second. Again, I instantly bumped her out of 4 the moment that she has all of this delight for her bow at the beginning, and she goes and she shoots the arrow and she misses. And I was like, I don't know if a 4 just like doesn't have any kind of disappointment or sad reaction to that. However, and this is going to be a little side note because it's important for this. Merida, in spite of the hardship that she goes through and the disconnect that she and her mother are having, she's being nurtured in a very loving environment. I would say that she is probably experiencing a decent level of security in herself because of the kind of attention and affection she seems to have consistently received through her life. And I think that's important to note. For Rapunzel, definitely not the case. Gaslit her whole life. I would say that she probably experienced some significant levels of stress through her environment. And then you have Belle, and I also see a greater likelihood of stress, although some of that I would say is like cultural stress, interestingly enough. And again, one day I will likely do a video about 4s and the cultural expectancy that they might behave as 2s, which is their stress number, which is just an interesting little side note. But here is the first time we're seeing a child in one of these movies growing up in what I would say is a pretty friggin' healthy environment, in spite of this, like I said, difficult dynamic with her mother. And I think this is important because now, instead of thinking about, okay, we will talk about what Merida does when she's stressed, but for the most part, I'm seeing a child, and she's a child in this. I think she's technically supposed to be 16, has been experiencing a lot of security, a lot of love, a lot of protection, a lot of nurturance. And so that started making me think about, okay, if she's secure and this is how she's behaving, what types might this be like? And so I'll get into that a little bit. So, but again, talking about her anger, 4s and 6s can express a lot of anger for different reasons. But and 6s also, again, like I said at the beginning, the arrow being shot and her missing, I think that if this was a 4 story, even in a very healthy environment, she might still express frustration or sadness or shame about having missed. And her parents would have then had an opportunity to say, no, that's okay, right? This is about trying, and that you are deserving of love and acceptance and belonging just as you are, not based on anything that you fail at. And I just don't see this particular setup being a setup for an Enneagram 4. Okay. For a 6, there are counterphobic 6s. So 6s are in that head triad. Their core emotion is fear. And for 6s, there is the expression of where they are experiencing fear, But instead of seeming like they're afraid or even acknowledging their own fear, they're just doing the thing anyway. There's like there's an almost epic quality. And so there is that possibility. But again, I still think that what happens for counterphobic sixes is that they experience fear, but instead they don't like it. And so they move into anger instead. And so there is that possibility. But again, we're just not seeing much fear from Merida. And I also am not seeing a lot of what I would call the mental, when she's stressed, she is getting very, very logical. Merida is. And I don't know if sixes do that. Again, let's talk sixes. Let me know what you think about that. All right. So she goes through and she says, I want my freedom. And she's also very aware of how it's not fair. And I'm just bumping her pretty quickly into that body triad. She seems to be really aware of injustice. It's not fair is a thing she's saying a lot in this film. Her main emotion seems to be anger. And it's also like kind of like explosive anger, but it kind of goes away really fast too. And then I was like, okay, she independent, withdrawn, or responsive. So this is the strategy that the strategy triads, like how they get what they want. Is she moving towards what she wants? Is she withdrawing for what she wants? Or is she responding to the energy around her to get what she wants? I'm seeing independence all over her type, which would lead us into a 3, 7, or 8. Although there's only one of those types that's also in the body triad. And then I asked, okay, for coping, when she's first getting upset, what is it that she does in order to like solve the problem? Is she doing positive outlook? Again, I don't see her doing positive outlook not once for this whole thing. Am I seeing competency? Is she trying, like she doesn't really go into solving problems. Like she doesn't set aside her emotions like ever for this film. Instead, I'm seeing somebody who's rather reactive. There's a problem, and the more her mother doesn't listen to the problem, the more like upset she gets and the more intense she gets about the issue. And that would, again, there's only one body triad or body type that's in this one. And then I ask, okay, how does she connect? Is it to adapt or attach? Is it idealism or is it gift giving? And I think that we see this happen more actually in the future after her mother gets changed into a bear. Spoiler alert. But at this point, if she's in the body triad, if she's also in the independent triad, that automatically leads to Enneagram 8. If she's also in the reactive triad, again, I had the thought of, okay, is she in the independent triad, but is she using her head? Is she that counterphobic 6? Or even is she a 7 with a strong 8 wing? And I'm like, okay, when she first moves into stress, is she doing positive outlooking? Negative. That's no 7s here. Is she being reactive? Yes, that could still be 6. But is she being independent, withdrawn, or responsive? I don't see her being responsive. I see her being very independent. And this is leading us right down, again, right into 8 every time. All right. So that's where I've landed on Merida being an 8. But let's continue on. So she gets really angry about the fact that her mother is going to make her get married. And it's a real issue. And she says it's not fair. She wants her freedom. What is it that 8s want? All right. So 8s want to be strong, independent, and in control of their own life. I'm going to say that again. In control of their own life. The entire premise of this movie is if you can change your fate. So 8s want to protect themselves and those they care about while also living in their own power and integrity. What's interesting is the wound for the 8 is that it's not okay for me to be vulnerable or trust anyone. I cannot trust others to protect me, and I must become strong enough to protect myself. Now, this is what I find very interesting about this particular storyline is that, as I was saying earlier, Merida seems to be in a pretty secure, nurturing family environment. And we even see this in a flashback later on with the mother. And I'll bring it up now. I'll just do it out of order. But there's a flashback to when she's very little and they're in this castle and she's playing next to the fire with a toy, and her mother is singing a song and working on the tapestry that becomes a part of the story. And there's a massive thunderstorm going on outside. A huge peal of thunder rolls through. Merida is frightened. She screams, and she ducks under the tapestry blanket and comes up and to her mother. And her mother, I have it written down here, says something about like a brave wee lass up here on my lap. And then she goes, it's this very sweet moment where the mother takes her, it's going to make me choked up, puts her hand on Merida's head, and she says, I'll always be right here. And there's this very protective nature going on. So Merida, and we see her father is very strong and also very caring and connected. So again, very nurturing environment where Merida clearly seems to have grown up with this sense of being nurtured. And so I think that this is important to note because I think this is why it takes a little bit longer for this particular 8 to do something bigger. Because I think that there's this story that, like, of course they're not going to make me do something I don't want to do until, all right, so the suitors show up and Merida gets dressed in this dress that her mother puts her in where she is literally being suffocated and she's not allowed to move. And I will tell you, this is like a body type. Like just no, they don't want to be constricted. There's an Enneagram 8 in my life, and when they're stressed and if you go up and hug them, it's actually really, really hard because they don't want to feel trapped. They don't want to feel trapped. And so like this is like a big deal for an 8 to be like constricted in a stress, in my opinion. I think other types would have other issues with it. Like a 4 would be like, this isn't me. Where Merida's response is like, I can't breathe, I can't move. And that's a problem. So we see, and I think that this is really, really sweet, that we see the mother try to have there's a possible moment of vulnerability where she's going to say something to Merida that lets Merida know that that her perspective is heard, that she is seen, that she's going to be taken into consideration through this process. And instead, the mother just says, you look perfect, and walks out. And we see like real emotional hurt on Merida's face, which I think she shakes off really fast. Which, if she's an Enneagram 8, I think that this is indicative of how an 8 would be. We see this several times where Merida, like 8s feel things very intensely. I love the analogy where 8s are like teddy bears on the inside and they feel things so, they're very, very tender, which is why they have to have all of this protective armor. And so essentially Merida has emotion, but then quickly like shuts it down. Again, if she were a 7, I think we would see positive outlook go on, but instead we just see, no, just going to detach from that, which is what I think an 8 would be more likely to do. All right, so we get to, I said she gets controlled in the dress. The suitors come, and then they're inviting all the different tribes in to the big dining hall, the throne room, and the mother, showcases like real feminine strength in this moment. And I bring it up because it happens later. And this is really supposed to showcase, I think, how Merida learns from her mother and is able to step into the power her mother has while also still having her own, which is this beautiful thing that happens for the story, because this is a transformation story, much more than both Belle and Rapunzel go through, but the transformation is a little bit of the mother and daughter both learning to have some of the perspective of the other and taking on some of the traits of the other, which is going to tie in nicely to what I think the gift of an 8 has. So again, Merida goes less through a transformation and more through a few experiences that bring her some learning, but again, definitely more transformation than I would say Belle or Rapunzel at this point. So the suitors are in there, the tribes are in there. The mother it's like showcasing like real queenly strength and starts talking about the competition that's going to happen. And this is, if I wasn't sure that Merida was an 8, this is when I was like, oh boy, here we go. So she's on the throne, listening to the mother talk about the competition, and she hears the rules about what the competition is tomorrow. And she hears that it has to be a firstborn who can enter the challenge, and the challenge gets picked by the princess, and instantaneously Merida has taken the information. It's like been half a second since she's heard the information. And before the mother can even get done saying that the princess gets to pick the challenge, she's jumping up and she says, archery. Archery is the one I pick, because she has already created a plan. So 8s have this thing where they are thinking and doing the fastest of any of the types. So they are the body triad. So they are doing first, and they have thinking second. But they are like, their thinking and doing is happening like right next to each other. I have seen 8s in action. I don't know how you do it. It's incredible to me, but it's like the information gets absorbed and then instantaneously is moving into action. I don't know how, like this is why I think 8s are known to have the most energy of all the types, because of this particular thing, because feelings aren't necessarily a part of the equation until, and this is a thing that happens, and eventually we will do a character breakdown of each of the types where they go through like a real transformation arc. But one of the things that can happen for an 8 is that they start bringing up the repressed center of feeling, and really what that means is getting in touch with their own sense of innocence and their own sense of vulnerability. And by that I mean like, eights are actually vulnerability. I'm not gonna say vulnerability. It's their own innocence, their own child, like self, and realizing that that part of them needs to be loved and cared for in a very tender way. And when 8s get into that, they can feel a big decrease in their energy. And it's one of the things that I think is most challenging about 8s going on their own healing inner work, because it's like this resource of energy is very nice to have. And again, eventually one day we'll do a deeper breakdown on that. But I think it's interesting to note that this is something that I think is a difficulty for 8s when going on that healing journey. All right, so Merida has concocted her plan. She's already set it into action within seconds of concocting that plan. Again, that's got 8 written all over it. And so the next day happens, and she and her father are joking around. And again, I do think that the father is probably a 7, and that Merida has a 7 wing, because we can see them. They start joking about all of the suitors and how ridiculous they are, and how, that you can tell the father feels like this is a joke, and Merida joins in with the joking quite a bit at this point. And again, she's in this dress. It's very tight. It's very restrictive. She keeps pulling down like her strand of red hair as like rebellion. And again, 8s don't want to be controlled. Clearly, this is a circumstance. This is a time era, even though her parents seem to be very nurturing and considerate, where there are gendered expectations that may feel like she has to at least go along with to a certain extent, but she is still choosing to rebel in little ways. So this is when we hear that the archery part has been set up, and we see each of the suitors, each one a little bit more ridiculous than the last, go through and shoot their targets, and each one doing, only okay until the most ridiculous boy accidentally hits the bullseye. And the father goes to the mother, is like, "Are you kidding me? Look at who's going to be coming over for dinner," right? Like, you can see he's very frustrated with the fact that Merida is also in this situation. And then we go over to turn to Merida, and she's gone. And instead, she has walked up in front. She pulls off a hood. She has her own bow and arrow, and she announces that she's going to fight for her own hand. And we see the mother get very upset about this, and Merida goes through, and she hits the bullseye on each of the boys' targets, and right at the end, she releases. And again, we see this steadiness in her. She is unflappable. She has decided something. And then she has done it. Her emotions are like, even though she is doing this for an emotional reason, her emotions are like almost not a part of the action that's taking place. And so she goes through, hits all of the bullseyes, turns, and her mother's there. They have a frustrated, like, they're both very upset at each other. And so lots of emotional intensity. And it cuts to the mother and her having an argument in the bedroom. And we see the tapestry that the mother has put together of the family. And it's Merida and her holding hands in this tapestry. And Merida's argument that her mother is wrong about what she did, because the mother is like, "You embarrassed everybody." And Merida goes, "I followed the rules." And she consistently uses logic to tell her mother how she was right. And I see 8s do this all the time. 8s move into 5 in stress. And I think having that arrow of stress, 5s are very objective. They are again, they bring in data. They want the best possible answers. And I think 8s have this, again, with that thinking and doing right up at the top, they have this like objectivity to them and logic to them. And for them, it's like, this is what happened. This is like, I followed the rules. I literally did what you said was allowed. And I see 8s doing this. But again, she's doing it in this very emotionally intense way. And then she has the sword, and she rips the tapestry right where the mother and her are holding hands. And the mother becomes furious. She throws the Merida's bow into the fire. And this is when I was certain that Merida's mother is a 1. In a moment of pure frustration and anger, which ones have, she throws the bow into the fire. This is the ultimate moment of stress that Merida's had, because up until this moment, I believe Merida has kept thinking, I have a plan. There will be something that will persuade my mother to get me out of the situation. At no point did Merida, I think up until this point, believe that her mother would actually make her go through this, or that Merida wouldn't be able to solve the problem. And at this point, her mother has done well, first of all, Merida did something really emotionally intense of cutting the tapestry, something she knew would hit home for her mother. And then the mother throws the bow in the fire. And this is the moment where I think Merida has her highest level of stress. Her mother is not going to get this. And so Merida runs off. 8s in stress go to 5, 5s withdraw. And I will talk about this more about what she does next too, because I think, yeah. So Merida runs off. The mother sees the bow, like she has like a moment where like the fog clears, the anger clears. She sees what she's done and she grabs the bow out of the fire and instantly has like this massive look of shame. What have I done? And she knows she can't fix it. And ones, when they go to stress, hit 4 space. And I think that's what we see with the mother. Okay, so Merida is off running through the forest with her horse. She's crying. And then she is flung off into the center of these massive rocks. Seems like a magical place. It's where she was at the beginning of the story, I think, with the will-o'-the-wisps. And the horse won't come through the rocks with her. She sees the will-o'-the-wisps. She follows them. She follows them to a house store with what we find out is a witch who does wood carvings. And it's a kind of silly little moment. There wasn't much here that I was like, yeah. But Merida has followed the will-o'-the-wisp before. She's seen them. She knows that they're real. She believes that they are telling her how she can change her fate. And she says she knows that there's a solution here because of it. And she finds out that this woman is a witch and she wants a spell. She wants a spell and she wants a spell. She goes, I want a spell to change my mom that will change my fate, because that will change my fate. And this is something that I think 8s do, where, and again, remember, Merida is 16. We have to remember she is young. This is not like somebody who has their full prefrontal cortex online. But is still utilizing 8ness. And so she has concocted the most logical possible response. And it is in fact this part that made me believe that Merida could not possibly be an 8, because all of the 8s I know tend to behave very rationally. And this, in retro, like when I hadn't seen the movie in a while and I was like, I don't know if an 8 would have a witch make them a spell without being like real, like on it. And this is the thing. Obviously, there are lots of levels of maturity and even intelligence, no matter what your type is. And Merida is 16. And I also think that she has actually moved into a low state of her security number, which I think that 8s can sometimes do more easily because of the amount of self-agency and authorship they naturally have. So when 8s get stressed, they go to 5. When they feel secure, they go into 2 space, which is one of the reasons I was curious if Merida was in fact 2. But 2s tend to showcase anger when they're stressed, whereas Merida tends to just kind of live there. And when she gets really stressed, she actually seems to withdraw, which 2s wouldn't do. And plus, I don't see a bunch of 2 things that there wasn't anything that was like super 2-ish that popped up for me with Merida. But again, if you're a 2, let me know. Although I would not be surprised if a lot of 2s relate to Merida, because 2s in stress go to 8, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was something where this connected with them. So what was I saying? 8s. I think that 8s, because they can have like this, they're like kind of audacious. And I think that they can feel pretty secure in themselves. And I think because of that, they move into 2 space, I think, pretty easily. And I think that Merida in this moment is actually in a the low side of her security number, which is the villain space. She's not there for a super long time. We all hit that space at different times in our lives. But she believes she is right. She is not questioning at all whether she's wrong. Her perspective is right. She has thought through this all logically, and her mother is completely in the wrong. Her mother needs to change. And what I keep hearing in this is that her agency, Merida's agency, is contingent on her mother's perspective changing. And I have seen this in eights before, where they can feel like their own life is that they're trapped because somebody else won't understand something. And they'll use logic over and over and over and over and over again to try to like wake that person up. And that's, most people don't actually work that way. Who knew? And so we see Merida, like, she is at her wit's end, but she believes she's right. And so twos have thinking last. And what I mean by that is that they don't necessarily move through the world being able to easily be objective or easily be able to strategize which thoughts take priority or to problem solve in a way where it's like the most conducive. And again, we'll do breakdowns later of what that looks like. But I think that Merida is not thinking clearly, but believes she's totally right in this space when she asks the witch to make her a potion, a spell. And also she like audaciously, the witch won't give her anything. And she's like, I will buy every carving you have here and a spell. And like, she's, again, independent triad is just written all over this character. When she wants something, she just goes after it. And when she doesn't want something, she just doesn't do it. And there's a instance in the future where I'll point that out too. So she gets the spell that she believes will change her fate, because Merida is all about wanting her own destiny in her hands. That is her motivating operating system, which is 100% eightness. All right. So then she takes this little cake spell to her mother. And what's really interesting is that her mother shows up, and there's a moment where it seems like the mother is going to understand her perspective. And Merida, like, wouldn't have given her the cake if her mother had done that. Like, okay, good, you got it. The problem has been solved. I don't have to use this spell. But then the moment it's clear that her mother has not changed her perspective whatsoever, Merida slaps a smile on her face and says, "Peace offering?" And she says that she made it just for her. And again, I'm hearing some low side to in this. It's a little bit of a villainous moment for Merida. Look at what I made for you. A little manipulative, getting into some of that feeling center of like, anyway. So the mother is clearly touched by this. You made this for me. And then Merida, the mother takes a little bite, and Merida every like 2 seconds is like, have you changed your mind yet about the marriage? And the mother's like, no. And she then feels really sick and then goes off to the bedroom, and Merida helps her into bed. While she's in bed, the mother changes into a bear. And again, another instance where there's suddenly a bear there, and Merida screams, "Bear!" But there's not much fear on her face. Again, it's more like alarm, which I just don't see 5, 6s, or 7s behaving that way. And then the mother and her realize what's happened. Merida explains and also tells her mother that it's her fault many times. And one of the things I found really funny is that they're now running through the castle, and the mother keeps trying to put, as a bear, a blanket around her because she's quote unquote naked. And like the mother is trying to be very prim and proper this whole time. And Merida at one point jerks the blanket off her because it's slowing them down. And she goes, with logic and anger combined, says, "You're covered with fur. You're not naked." Right? Like, and I just see 8s doing this. Like, especially if it's slowing down what needs to happen. Like they need to get out of the palace. Like they need to get out. Otherwise, bad things are going to happen. And this blanket that you're covering over you for no reason is getting in the way. Like all 8ness. Please tell me if you're an 8, if you relate. Okay. And then she runs into her brothers, her 3 little brothers who are like the epitome of mischief. And she explains to them what's happened. They're totally on board. She needs them to make a what is it called, like when you just a big distraction, and the brothers only do it. Merida goes, I will give you all of my dessert for like 6 months or something. Like she gives something outrageous, like all of your desserts for 6 months is a massively good deal. And the brothers are still like, no. And then finally, Merida gives them a year of her desserts. And I thought this was interesting because there's a particular 8 I have in my life who is constantly it's almost like a love language for them to be like, okay, I'll make a deal with you. And the answer is you always say yes. You don't have to hear the deal because it will always be in your favor. And I don't know if that's the case for all 8s, but I just thought it was interesting that her little brothers clearly knew that Merida would like keep giving until like it totally was in their best interest already with 6 months of dessert, and they were able to amp it up to a year because they knew that they could. And I could just see that potentially being the case for 8s. Like, I don't know. You'll have to let me know. It was just an interesting thing when I was watching that scene. All right, so they get the mother outside, and they go to the witch's place. The witch is gone. And quite frankly, this is the moment where I think we see Merida in her highest level of stress. She has her first big moment of stress, which is when she decides to go get the spell. But then this is her actual biggest moment of stress. There's a vial, there's a cauldron, right? Because the witch is gone on a wood carving retreat thing. And she goes, but when you walk into this shop, the cauldron has this thing that lights up and there's the witch's face. And she was like, if you're that redhead girl, use the 3rd vial. And the Merida puts the 3rd vial into the cauldron. And the woman says, I forgot to tell you something. If your mother doesn't, by the 3rd sunrise or the 2nd sunrise, your mother will be a bear forever. Unless you, the fate be changed, look inside, mend the bond torn by pride. And then Merida, like, that's not enough information. There's not an answer. And Merida needs an answer. She needs a solution. Something bad has happened. And this is the first time that we're going to see Merida start experiencing a significant amount of guilt. And again, stress. What she did not work the way her very certain mind thought it would. And she starts grabbing all of the other vials that are technically messages for other people that if they come into the shop, and she just starts pouring them all into the cauldron. And she is spinning out. She is mentally spinning out about trying to solve this problem. And this is the epitome of 8s in stress space. Going into that 5, like not enough information. Gather information. Try to solve the problem. And it does not work because there is no solution. And they get outside. Merida calms down. She creates a little shelter for her and her mother. And she tells her mother, we'll sort it out tomorrow. And again, 8s are future focused. They're actually future focused and often frustrated by the present. We'll go into that in a different video. But Merida is already going like, okay, we'll sort it out tomorrow. We will make a solution tomorrow. And the mother turns away from her. This is actually when we see that flashback to when Merida is a little girl and there's the storm and the mother protects her. And then the morning happens. The mother is gone. She has tried to get several berries and make makes this very prim and proper breakfast of sorts. And Merida has to tell her that the mother has picked poisonous berries, and the mother also can't actually eat with utensils and things like that. And so they go to the river, and Merida teaches her, or no, actually Merida has a bow. This is another very 8 moment, in my opinion. So Merida has her bow. She shoots a fish. She brings the fish back, and the mother claps. And Merida's first response is, where is it? Oh yeah, she goes, wait, aren't princesses not supposed to have weapons, right? Isn't it improper for a princess to have weapons? Something in that vein. Like, she repeats something her mother has told her. And it's like an 8, I think. I don't know if they relish the opportunity. I think to the rest of us, it looks like relishing. So you'll have to let me know if you're an 8. But like, the moment that they can point out when somebody else's certainty or logic doesn't work, and it actually benefited them, like, they were right, the other person was wrong. It's not that they want the other person to feel shame. They want the truth to, it's a justice thing, I believe. And so Merida uses the opportunity to remind her mother of how, technically you don't think this is appropriate, remember? And then she makes her mother fish, and she does it like her mother keeps wanting more and more fish. And they get like through 3 rounds of Merida making her fish before Merida just points to the river and says, no, you go, you do it. And this is very 8-ish in my opinion. Like, they'll help you to a certain extent, but they don't love learned helplessness. Like, you need to stand up on your own. You're a bear. You're capable. Let's go to the river. And Merida does also show her how to get the fish. And it ends up being this really beautiful bonding moment. And I think when we look at that, how the different types connect, 8s give gifts, and they give the gift of their strength. They give the gift of seeing other people's potential and pushing you towards your potential if they care about you. If they don't, they're not gonna. And I think that's what we see Merida doing with her mother here. You're capable. You've got this. I will show you how to do this, but you are still going to do it on your own. And this is like, you see them having this big bonding moment. It's the biggest bonding moment we see them have for this film. And then we see Merida's mother starts turning into a bear for a blip. And so it's the first time we're starting to notice, like, oh, this is what it's going to be like if we don't fix this. And it's a little scary. And then what happens? What do I have next? Yeah. Oh, her mother freaks out a little bit about this. And Merida's response is, we've got to keep our heads. And I wrote it down because I was like, that's such an 8 thing to say. Like, no freaking out. Keep our heads. Stay on target. And then they go back to the castle because Merida figures out that they need to fix the tapestry. They do run into the old bear. There's this whole other B plot storyline about the bear having done the same thing, that the bear at the beginning that attacked them did the same thing that Merida did. And so we find out that Merida figures that she needs to go fix the tapestry, and that's going to fix the problem. And so they go back to the castle, and all of the clans are fighting. And this is the first time where we see Merida utilize the strength of her mother being very queenly and walking out and essentially calming all of this chaos. And this is when we see them both choosing to see from the other person's perspective, take on some of the strengths of each other, which is what I think the point of this movie is. It's less about like a big shift from point A to point B, but rather being able to see from another person's perspective and come closer because of it. So Merida utilizes the strength her mother has been showing her, is very queenly, and she tells everybody, she essentially apologizes and she was really selfish for what she did, and she's about to say, and I will choose somebody, and we see her mother as the bear sneaking around say like, no, don't say that, and instead the mother translates through sign language to Merida that everybody should be able to marry who they love and have there's like a bunch of having independence and your own say in your own life that shows up in the language here. Again, very 8-ish. And so there's this bonding moment again where both of them finally choose to see each other's perspective. And then Merida and her mother run off and they get the tapestry, and the mother turns into bear for a while and attacks the father, attacks Merida, comes to her senses. The father is freaking out that the bear has what he thinks killed the mother. And so he locks Merida in the room because she keeps trying to tell him not to hurt the bear. And then all of he and the tribe, the other tribes, the other clans go out to attack the bear, to kill the bear. And this is when we find out that the 3 little brothers have also eaten the tarts and have turned into little monster bears, and they help Merida get out. Again, the little brothers are used mostly for comic relief. Then Merida gets out with the brothers and gets to the mother, who's already been captured by all of these guys. And this is the part that's going to make me choke up a ton. Okay, so they're attacking the mother. The father is about to kill the mother, the bear. And Merida does absolutely everything to keep her father from doing this. She tries to use logic. He doesn't hear her. And then she picks up a sword and she fights with the sword. And it's like, to me, this is through and through how an 8 behaves. You will not hurt that who is innocent. You will, I will protect with every molecule of my being those who are innocent. And that is 100% what I see happening here. She says something like, I won't let you hurt my mother. A whole bunch of stuff, right? And then the other monster bear shows up, and the father figures out that this is in fact the mother, and that his 3 young sons have been turned into little bears. And then they have to fight to the other big bear. And this is like when the mother becomes fierce. She takes on some of that strength that Merida has been showing her and offering her, and she becomes fierce and throws out all of her prim and proper ways and becomes relentless. And eventually they defeat the bear. And this is how I feel like it's very much an 8 story. And I'm sorry, I'm a 4. I'm gonna get emotional. I'm not actually sorry about it at all. So Merida sees that the final sunrise is happening, and she grabs the tapestry that she's sewn and fixed, and yes, it's with silly stitches, and she throws it over the mother, and then she's like waiting. And this is another reason I was like, this is such an 8 move. They have found the most likely solution. This is the solution. And she just sits there and she's like, this is going to work. Why isn't it working? It's not even like, why isn't it working? She's just determined that this is in fact going to be the thing that works. And it keeps not working until the moment where she has an emotional realization that it's not working. It's not going to work. And so she goes up and she hugs her mother, she can see her mother changing into the final bear stage. And she's hugging her mother. And she does say, and I thought that this was interesting, this is all my fault. We've heard this now from both Rapunzel and Belle, so just an interesting little side note. However, she doesn't express almost any shame, and in fact, this is pretty much all her fault, except for the fact that her mother also was not listening, but she did something drastic. But again, is it actually all her fault? I don't know. I just think it's interesting that this is a line that we have now heard in 3 movies at the end when the person that is the most loved is dying or disappearing, essentially. And she says, I want you back, mommy. And she goes into like full on little kid mode with her mom. And to me, I think this is very indicative of an 8 moving into their feeling space, of getting in touch with that vulnerability, with their own tenderness. And she finally says, I love you. And that is, of course, what changes or what breaks the spell, which I think was lovely and wonderful. And then her mother changes back, and we see the mother with her hair down. She's relaxed. She's a little silly. She has, and Merida like looks at her and says, you changed. And the mother says, we both have. And that is the transformation of both of them. Like Merida gets in touch with her feelings, like gets softer. She also like chooses to understand her mother. The very thing she was upset about her mother with is what she was also doing, not choosing to see it from her mother's perspective. And then the mother relaxes, and also chooses to not be so traditional, but rather maybe and less principled, if you will, and more actually good to those that she loves. And so it ends with the mother and daughter having their day of freedom on horses, running through. So the very first scene where Merida is running through, having her day of adventure, now we see her having it with her mother. And we hear her say, as the final notes of this movie, of, there are those that say fate is something beyond our command, that destiny is not our own, but I know better. Our fate lives within us. You only have to be brave enough to see it. And if I haven't ever heard an 8 like mantra or saying or ending to a movie, that is it. I mean, that again, this is something that Merida, the gift that this movie has isn't that Merida goes on a big transformation. In fact, I think she believed this the whole time, right? The theme that we're seeing so far with these Disney princess movies is that the gift of who they are is what makes everything okay in the end, right? That there's a truth to their gift. And this is the final note of this movie, that our fate lives within us if we are only brave enough to see it. And I think that 8s live this way. I think this is something that just runs in their veins. If you want to have some of the magic of an 8, especially an 8 that has done some of that work of getting in touch with their own feelings so that they can also be what's the word that I'm looking for? Cognizant of your feelings as well, which is when 8s are like, their strength that they're offering can really be brought in by others. Like the magic that 8s offer is this: having you realize that your fate is in your own hands, if only you're brave enough to see it. So that's where we will end this. This is why I believe Merida is in fact an 8. If you are an 8, I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you found this valuable, please like, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate it so much. I'm so excited about what we're building here, and I cannot wait to see you in the next video. All right.